What is up, everybody? I hope you're doing well. As many of you know, over the course of this past year, I've made some pretty damning statements. One of which was that I was done with the gaming industry. And seemingly, as pretty much every thumbnail on my timeline says today, the gaming industry is officially cooked. I won't really get into the nitty-gritty about why. You can watch other YouTubers talk about that if you'd like. But seeing as how this very weird 2025 eventually led to me buying a PC, and even beyond that, buying a Lenovo Legion Go, I find myself in this weird position where, despite all of the negative feelings I've had towards the industry and Nintendo in particular, I'm feeling like I'm in a pretty good spot when it comes to games, and obviously a lot to do with that is because of emulation. Now, there are a ton of devices you could buy, obviously, if your goal is emulation. I feel like I can't sign on to YouTube without a new random Android device that has some kind of interesting gimmick coming out at me, and all of them pretty much do the same thing. They allow you to play all of your old games in a much more convenient form factor than most other devices would allow you to do so. Now, while I did consider some of these Android devices, and I do highly recommend them for people that are working within a budget, somewhere over the past few months I decided that I wanted whatever I had saved on my desktop to be available to me pretty much anywhere that I go. Not only necessarily because I'd be gaming portably, but also because there are a lot of times where I'm traveling. I could be visiting friends, visiting family, spending game nights on a random Saturday night at somebody's house. And while historically over the past 8 years I used to just pack my Switch up into a bag and head over to wherever I needed to go, I found that now that I've shifted most of my games onto my PC, obviously, again, mostly through emulation, when I would be out and about and I would take my Switch with me, I'd be like, oh man, if I had my PC with me, we could be playing pretty much every game that I already have on my Switch, plus being able to play something else entirely altogether. So obviously, one thing led to another. I spent months just doing a bunch of different research on different handheld devices, and I ended up landing on the Lenovo Legion Go. There's like a whole laundry list of reasons of why I decided to buy this device with all of the ones that are out there available in the real world, but it comes down to a few main factors. And I apologize if this is repeated information from a previous video. But first off, this screen is 1600p, which means that vertically it's a little bit taller than most 16:9 screens would be. And it's a massive screen. I think it's 8.8 inches. Which, something that I heard other people say that I kind of resonated with was that the screen that you use is the window into the game you play. You could have an average device that is made better with a good screen, or a pretty decent device that's actually made worse with a bad screen. This is why OLED screens are so popular. Ask anybody that went from having a Switch to a Switch OLED, or a Steam Deck to a Steam Deck OLED, or even people that have gone out and spent $1,400 or whatever it is on the Legion Go 2. Those screens are absolutely gorgeous. Now, the Legion Go that I got does not have an OLED screen, but based off of a few techie reviews that I saw before I bought it, and then even my experience after I purchased it, it definitely does not feel like a cheap screen. If anything, it feels like it enhances the experience. Not only that, but the vertical resolution in and of itself allows you to kind of immerse yourself into the game you're playing. And even better than that, when I'm playing classic games, which I do a lot of, that 4:3 aspect ratio just fits in and sits so much better when you're playing. Or Game Boy Advance titles, for example. The way that they sit onto the screen fits better than any 16:9 screen ever could. But look, I'm not going to sit here and try to convince you guys to go and buy a Legion Go strictly because of the emulation, but I will say that if you are a Nintendo fan, you love retro Nintendo titles, or you might even have a massive Switch library that you want to play in a better performance, in addition to having access to every single massive AAA title that's been released to PC and will likely get released in the future, at this moment in time, specifically this Black Friday week, there are some phenomenal deals for the handheld PC gaming world, and there are options that would fit pretty much everyone's budget, and each one of those is an excellent bang for your buck. And this starts obviously with the Steam Deck. $320 right now for Black Friday, great deal. At that price point, there is no device currently on the market that's going to get you a better gaming value. I genuinely believe that. However, the lower model Legion Go that runs off the Z2 Go chip, and it runs SteamOS right out of the box, is basically, from my understanding, a stronger version of a Steam Deck, and it's available on BestBuy.com. Currently on a Black Friday deal for $450. And you might even be able to find an open box for $400. You know how like the Steam Deck gets a lot of comparisons with the Switch 2, and people like to discuss which one's actually stronger? And the discussion basically comes down to the one that's stronger is the one that the developer will be willing to put more effort into optimizing for that device. For the Z2 Go, which is actually at the price of the Switch 2 during this Black Friday deal, for that device, there's not really any debate or discussion. it's going to run pretty much every third-party title better than the Nintendo Switch 2 at the same price point, plus you get access to everything else that I'm going to be going through. Now, personally, what I would recommend, and this is what I actually ended up doing, was instead of buying the cheaper Legion Go that has the Z2 Go chip, I'd actually recommend trying to find a deal on an open box Z1 Extreme Legion Go, whether that's the Legion Go S or the original Legion Go with the detachable Joy-Cons. You can try your luck on Best Buy. The open box stuff often depends on the stores that are around you. You might be able to find something in the low 500s. I'd say this is a pretty good place to start because if you get something that's open box and you don't like the way that it's running, you can always return it within the return window available. And I think Best Buy right now has the open window extended through January, so it'd be a very good time to try it out. They would cost about $500 right now, and the jump up from that 450 version to that I think would be worth it. Or if you're somebody that's a little bit more adventurous with the way that you shop around, jump on eBay and look for a used copy of one of these things. I got a 512 gigabyte Legion Go for $400. That's the original Legion Go with the detachable Joy-Cons, and it came shipped in a much better condition than I expected. And the cool thing is too, is despite that, when I set everything up, I still got an offer of 3 months free of Xbox Game Pass from Microsoft, which I believe, based off of how much it costs monthly for Game Pass right now, is worth around $7,000. And look, these are some quick ideas. This just kind of tells you what I would do if I was in your position. There are also ASUS devices that are available, the MSI Claws out there. These are things that you would have to go and speak to somebody or look at a YouTube channel of somebody that's a lot more experienced with this stuff than I am to figure out if those are better options for you. But the reason I'm recommending the cheaper Steam Deck or the slightly more expensive Legion Go S, and even jumping up a step further and getting the Legion Go S that's a little bit stronger than that, is strictly because these come out of the box running Steam OS. I did not buy one of these things because I did not want Steam OS yet. I wanted to buy a Windows device, screw around with it for a little bit, and then eventually put Steam OS on there. I haven't gotten to that yet, but I'm still kind of, getting used to this device and experimenting quite a bit. But the beauty of SteamOS, whether it's the Steam Deck or one of these Legion Go's, is that all of that fear and complicated nonsense that many of us console gamers have once we decide to switch to PC, all that excessive tinkering, the adjustment with settings, the dealing with all of the driver updates, that's all pretty much out the window when you get one of these SteamOS devices. That's why people always tell you, dude, just get a Steam Deck, because it feels seamless to jump from this to that. This is why people have such high hopes for the Steam machine, because obviously, depending on the price point, it could allow somebody a seamless entry into the PC gaming world. I'm stressing the depending on a price point part because there's a lot of different talk going on around that right now. I'll probably have to do another video about the Steam machine once we do get an official price, whenever that does happen, if the entire tech world doesn't explode by then. In any case, I cannot recommend enough jumping into the handheld PC gaming world and buying something with SteamOS if you're somebody that absolutely despises the idea of playing with Windows on your device. Now, in my case, I actually do not mind using Windows all that much. I know at some point that'll change. Like I said, I'm kind of getting to that, and I might make a follow-up video when I get to that point. But there are some pretty simple ways to set up your device so that it boots straight into Steam on the full screen experience. It's like 2 boxes you gotta check in the settings when you first install Steam. The plus side to this is that it'll allow everything to be in one spot that you can control with the controller or the D-pad that's actually connected to the device. The downside is that you'll have to manually add everything on there that you might play that is not available on the Steam store, which is also not really that difficult. But anyway, regardless of that, realistically, most of you either already have a handheld gaming device or you're somebody that's considering getting one but don't know where to start. If you're in that latter category, SteamOS is the way to go. If you're somebody intrigued by the idea of having a device that runs Windows because you plan on playing a lot of games that are either off of the Xbox Game Store, the Epic Game Store, GOG, you might have to look up different ways in order to get those running straight through SteamOS or dual booting your device. There's all this different type of research that you can do, but that's not what this video is about. I want to focus a little bit of time on this video specifically about emulation, and primarily EmuDeck. To break it down to you in the simplest form that I understand it at least, and I'm hoping that I'm not wrong about this, the basic form of emulation is just downloading a standalone emulator. So for example, for GameCube and Wii games, that would be Dolphin. The Nintendo 64 and Game Boy Advance had some that I've used throughout the years. I think it was Project 64 and VBA. Basically, once you get that emulator downloaded on your PC, it's on you to go into that emulator and set everything up in the way that best suits your needs. Eventually, this became a lot simpler, and now people have RetroArch. RetroArch allows you to download one single program, and in that program, it's a pretty decent and easy to use UI, and all of that fun little tinkering you need to do, whether it's changing controls, setting hotkeys, choosing the best emulation settings that have some fancy words and acronyms that you don't know what they mean, and clicking on and off to see which one works the best. It's all done there through RetroArch, through each individual emulator. And basically it compiles all of these emulators together, allows you to update them and add your ROMs into it, and it just kind of makes it a little bit more seamless. But it still does take quite a bit of work to get used to using RetroArch, and I know this because I've used RetroArch quite a bit. My first experience with RetroArch was when I modded my Nintendo Switch. I downloaded RetroArch and I got all my emulators on there. Being able to play the entirety of the Nintendo library up to the Nintendo 64, having Sega Genesis on there. Given that the majority of the games I was playing on there were SNES or Game Boy Advance games, I didn't really tinker all that much because it was pretty easy to just get the game showing on your screen and I didn't have to think too much about it. Eventually, when I did get my Xbox Series X, however, that was when I discovered one of my favorite channels on YouTube. Obviously, that's Retro Game Corp. Hands down, one of the most useful channels on there. It's a massive channel. I'm probably not introducing you to Russ. You've probably already watched one of his videos if you're watching one of mine. But his channel has pretty much every guide that you need for setting up the perfect emulation machine, no matter what that machine might be. So when I had bought an Xbox Series X, I discovered his channel, and he had a very good guide to set up every single one of your emulators on RetroArch to make sure you got the optimal output with pretty much every single console available. And it was so easy to just follow along how he broke everything down. He went setting by setting on the menus in RetroArch to allow every single console to have the best display possible. I was running the God of War PSP games and they looked amazing. I was running Dreamcast games and they looked like they were modern games. But still, it did take a lot of time for me to set everything up on there. And I think learning how to use RetroArch is very useful, but it's also not user-friendly to the casual person that's not really used to this stuff. And of course, I'm saying all this because now I've finally discovered EmuDeck, despite people recommending it to me for so long. And oh my god, I did not understand how good this thing was. So I used to think that EmuDeck was just an alternate to RetroArch. I figured it was like, oh, you can either download RetroArch or you can download EmuDeck. And mind you, EmuDeck has grown throughout the years. Like 2 or 3 years ago, it was only available for the Steam Deck. Now it's available for every Windows device, to the point where I've actually downloaded it on my desktop. Because what this thing does is it takes it a step further. It downloads everything for you, all of the best emulators for each console that you want to play. In doing so, it will also download RetroArch because it will play retro games off of RetroArch specifically. But it will also download Dolphin, for example. But what it does is it also detects the device, or allows you to pick a device. So in my case, I clicked Legion Go. But if you're just using a desktop, you can click the desktop button. And then it'll run this little program in the background and automatically set every single thing up for you. What this means is it downloads all of the emulators, and including RetroArch, and it will tinker all of those settings that I had to do when I set it up for my Xbox Series X. It automatically optimizes the use of pretty much every single emulator, including setting up the best control options, checking boxes for stuff that you have no idea what they mean, and making it so that everything is running perfectly. And obviously, for those of you that are a little bit more savvy, you'll be able to go into the settings and adjust things as necessary. But for those of you that don't understand all of the backend stuff, this prepares every single console for you, where now your only duty is to get the ROMs. Now, obviously, don't pirate things, but rip all of the ROMs off of the physical cartridges and physical games that you own. Especially if you're working with Nintendo, make sure you own that cartridge and you rip your ROM specifically. Don't Google where to get the entirety of the NES, SNES, Game Boy Advance library, Nintendo 64 library. Don't do that, because what you'll find is Reddit links that will have those entire packages ready for you to click on and download them immediately onto your computer. And those libraries are very small. They won't take up that much space in your memory. I'm talking for all of the 2D stuff, it's less than a few gigs. And for the Nintendo 64 library altogether, I think last I checked, it was like 16 gigabytes, and that includes all regions. So don't do that, because you might find that you accidentally downloaded every single Nintendo game up to the Nintendo 64 and took up less than 20 gigabytes of space on your console. Instead, find out how to rip your ROMs off of your legally owned copies of every single game that you have. And of course, this doesn't have to stop at the Nintendo 64. This counts for all of your Wii games. It counts for your Switch games, which also run pretty well on the Legion Go, although I will not be displaying any of that for obvious reasons. It's too hot right now. There are a lot of eyes on me. But yeah, in the same vein, don't go out and download the NSP files or the XCI files for the Nintendo Switch games. That's haram. We don't want to be haram. keep it halal. But once you get all of those ROMs available, it's as simple as dragging and dropping them into the specific folder for that console, and that's pretty much it. Now, I don't know specifically how to do this with a SteamOS device. I don't know if you guys have to use an SD card for it, but since my Legion Go runs Windows, it's as easy as just dragging and dropping the files directly off of the desktop on there. Either way, you will be able to easily find guides of how to set this up no matter what the device is. When in doubt, Retro Game Corp and search whatever device you're buying, and you'll find a plethora of things to look for. After that, you can pretty much play without thought. Now, in the background of this video, I will show you some of this. I was very careful about which games I specifically chose to show, but I did jump around between some of the consoles. NES is easy enough. Here's Mega Man playing right in front of you. Nothing too extravagant. I own the Mega Man collections, but this is it running off of the emulator. Now, obviously, I've put most of my Wii games on here, and instead of just kind of showing you Mario Party or Mario Kart, I chose something a bit more obscure in the third-party nature and decided that I would display NBA Jam. Now, mind you, on the Wii, this thing runs at like 480i, 480p on a good day. But without tinkering, without tampering anything on this, it's got the controls set up for me already, assuming that I have a classic controller. And I'm gonna detach the Joy-Cons for this thing, so you can kind of take a look at how it looks like without it. Speaking of which, look how big these Joy-Cons are. The downside is you can't use them as individual controllers, or maybe you can, I just haven't found a mod for it, but here's like putting it side by side with an Xbox controller so you can get an idea of it. But yeah, this is a Wii game, and just upscaled, and it looks like a modern title. It runs very well. And I knew it would look this good up-res because I've played this on RetroArch on my Xbox Series X, and it's gotten to the point now where when I go back to my Wii U when I try to play this game, it's the Wii version of the game, it's awful. It looks outdated. I almost can't even look at it anymore. And you'll find a similar experience with pretty much every console. You know, you can move back to the Nintendo 64. Everybody has those games that they wish that Nintendo would put on Nintendo Switch Online, even though they never will. Bomberman 64 is a game that I loved when I was a kid, and I've been hoping that Nintendo would put it on NSO for a very long time. But now instead, I can just throw it on my Legion Go and I can play it wherever I want to play it. And you know, you get the added bonus of emulation where you can rewind and forward everything too, so you can skip all the long and boring cutscenes on some of these games. Which, let me tell you, there were a lot of long and boring cutscenes. And obviously this extends to the GameCube. Super Monkey Ball. Let's pick that one. This is a game I loved as a child. I played it a crap ton. You can either play it in the 4:3 native resolution where it fills the screen very well, or you can switch it to 16:9 and it'll stretch it out for you. But no matter which one you pick, this looks way better than the game would have looked on the GameCube. And obviously you can just buy the modern release of this game, but for the sake of avoiding any potential slaps on the wrist, I'm being careful about which games that I choose. But yeah, the point here is that this is very simple stuff with very minimal effort. Also, like the menu where you scroll through the different emulators that are available is really cool. You can get into the settings and you can screw around with that and make it look however you want. I think there's even a theme that kind of makes every app look like Nintendo Switch Online. And like I said, I'm not showing anything with Switch on here, but the cool thing is that it does run your Switch games very well. In a lot of cases, it will run them better than your Nintendo Switch will. And depending on the game, it'll even potentially run it on par or maybe better than what your Switch 2 will run these games on. Obviously, you will not be able to play your Nintendo Switch 2 games, not yet, until there's an emulator for that eventually. But you know, my logic is in the meantime, there's a whole ocean of games that I haven't played yet that I would not mind turning back and playing. And I can always grab myself a used Switch 2 later when it's on a mid-gen life cycle, has more games available, and I can get it used for pretty cheap. But as far as everything else the Nintendo Switch 2 offers, a lot of it is that retro library, and it's the Switch 1 library running at a better performance. You get that here. It's very easy to do it all without pirating too. It's also very easy to do it while pirating, but we don't condone that kind of behavior. Now keep in mind, I've only had this thing for something like 2 weeks now. I'm still very much working my way through setting it up. I haven't gotten any of my non-Nintendo emulators on there yet, but I've seen what this thing can play off of Retro Game Corp's different guides that he has set up. And I'm excited to add onto here a whole ocean of Sega games, a whole ocean of Sony games. You know, all of those retro titles that will never be re-released again and never uploaded into any stores in any compilations. There are tons of them that I missed out on, or I played them when I was a kid and I just don't have them and I can't find a physical copy anywhere. Or I might have a physical copy of some of these old games, but now I'll be able to play them in a much better performance, looking much better than it ever has. So while for me this does the whole Nintendo Switch 2 thing, but better, in that you pretty much get all of the retro consoles, and if I'm not mistaken, Wii U also runs on this thing. I should probably get to that. I didn't even think about that yet. Mainly because I have a Wii U sitting under my TV, but I could always just put all my stuff on here. But that's besides the point. Most of those Wii U games are already on Switch anyway. But yeah, you basically get the best classic Nintendo experience that you would want. You get the awesome classic experience of other consoles, up to like the PS360 generation, I believe. But then as an added bonus, this is also a PC, right? You still get every single Steam game. If you're running the Windows version, you still get access to Game Pass, and you still get access to every single new third-party title. I'm able to play Sonic Racing Crossworlds on this thing, and it looks and runs great. And of course, since it's a PC, I can tinker with the settings. If I want a longer battery life, I just put everything at half scale, push some buttons that I don't know what they mean, but it smooths it out, and I get the full frames per second that this thing offers depending on the game. Which, by the way, the Legion Go does support up to 144 frames per second. And then, if I'm sitting next to a plug or I'm playing something that's not as intense, I can put it on a higher resolution and enjoy all that has to offer. But honestly, with a screen this size, 800p runs very well and gives you a very good battery life, and I think it looks good enough for the more modern titles anyway. Like here's Rocket League, for example. One of my friends that plays with us plays it on the Switch 2. Unfortunately, for some reason, the Switch 2 has yet to get the Fortnite experience, so it's effectively just running the Switch 1 version, which is like one step above unplayable, if I'm being completely honest. But this is kind of here just to give you an idea that this thing is a PC. It's as strong as some of the mid to lower tier laptops that you might spend your money on. But it's in that form factor, that handheld gaming form factor that you would love. It's funny because I've shifted over to this device, but I haven't really bought any new games. I'm playing the same games that I was playing on my Switch and on my Xbox Series X and all of my retro consoles before it. And for the most part, those are overwhelmingly Nintendo titles, or Sega titles, or indie titles. But these are games that I've always been playing, but now I can play them in a much more comfortable form factor. I'm not paying for online. I'm easily able to dock this thing too. I didn't mention that. There's two USB-C ports on here, and you can actually reach the bottom port with the kickstand that's on there. So even if you're playing in tabletop, you still have access to both USB-C ports. I have a USB-C monitor on my desk that just powers and runs through. I just plug this thing right onto there, and I'm able to get everything right on my monitor in front of me. I'm able to use whatever controller I want, whether it's one of my Switch controllers or one of my Xbox controllers. At some point, I'll get a sensor bar so I can play my Wii games with my Wii controllers on here too. I'm not forced to be stuck on a specific product or a specific piece of hardware. Everything just basically works. And I don't know, I love the size of it too. Like, you put a Switch on top of this thing, it's a behemoth. But look, just for the sake of cutting this video off now because it's dragging on quite a bit, I'm not here necessarily to say that you should go out and buy this Legion Go. I'm just saying that with all of the Black Friday deals that are currently available, this is a very good time to jump into the handheld gaming PC world. I think I kind of already broken it down about the best bang for your buck depending on what your budget is. And if it's all intimidating for you, just make sure you buy one of those devices that run SteamOS. It's going to make everything extremely seamless for you. I've overcomplicated it by having Windows. Just having the entirety of the Steam library available for you, plus downloading EmuDeck, as a Nintendo fan. As somebody that felt underwhelmed by what the Switch 2 was going to be offering at the price point. And honestly, even if you're somebody that got a Switch 2 and you got more money to burn, one of these devices might still very much be worth your while. But I know in my case specifically, all of that disappointment that I felt because of Nintendo, because of the launch of the Switch 2, all of the negativity around it, all of the negativity around the entirety of the gaming industry. I bought this thing and I felt that Nintendo magic. And I haven't even installed the 3DS emulators and the DS emulators and all of that other stuff. I've played the classic Pokemon games in my life more times than I care to admit. And yet the other day I was just like, oh, let me see how Pokemon Emerald looks on this. And I ended up playing for 3 hours. Same thing happened with Diddy Kong Racing. I ended up going through most of the story mode the other day just on a whim. And then it's like I get a text message from one of my friends saying, hey, jump online, we're playing Sonic, or jump online, we're playing Rocket League. And normally I would go and play on my desktop for these things, but sometimes I'm just like, well, the thing's already out. I don't necessarily feel like going into my office. I'm laying down on the couch anyway, and I'll just jump online and play that with them. So yeah, that's kind of the whole point of this video, to be honest. Over the past few months, I've been mentioning over and over again how happy I am with a desktop. This experience that I've had with the Legion Go takes that and it amplifies it. And with the desktop, I never actually made a video about how awesome it is because I'm like, I'm not gonna sit here and try to sell people on going out and buying a $2,000 plus machine. But with the Legion Go and with the current Black Friday deals available and the fact that you can just jump online and find a good deal for this used right now, if you haven't already jumped into the handheld PC gaming world, this is the sign to do so before the entirety of the tech industry explodes and none of us are able to afford anything ever again. But yeah, that's all I got for tonight. Thank you so much for listening, and I will catch you all on the next one.